Hey there, hobby friends. I'm Jared, and this is Caffeinated Miniatures. Thanks for hanging out with me today. So I have just come back from a much-needed family vacation, which means I've spent a few weeks away from the painting table, the basement dungeon studio. And it's been kind of weird. After coming back to this hobby at the end of January, I don't think there's been a day where I haven't painted or at least prepped something. So I felt like jumping straight into a bigger project was just a little bit daunting after a few weeks away. A little too much to bite off. I needed something that I was excited about that I could maybe rattle off in a 2 or 3 hour single session. Enter in Van Helsing. Haskel Hexbane from the recent warband released for Warhammer Underworlds. Generally speaking, the Warhammer Underworlds sculpts are some of my favorites from Games Workshop, particularly recently, and Hexbane is certainly no exception. So I chopped the model out of the sprue, slapped it together, and hosed it down in black primer. And after a little bit of coffee, I was ready to go. As I often do, I kicked off the painting with the face, mixing up some black, purple, and mahogany brown for the base layer. Trying to focus the highlights to where the light would illuminate the face underneath the hat, I added some sunny skin tone to the mix. Then a small hit of ice yellow to the brightest points. Then, in an effort to deepen the shadows, I glazed in a dark mix of black and purple ink. Finally, adding some of the dark purple to the bottom lip. Moving on to the overcoat, armored jacket thing. I started with a mix of black and dark sea blue as a base coat. As a way of quickly working up through the highlights, I used quick, scratchy brush strokes in a semi-cross-hatched way. This was a double-duty thing. It helps create a bit of a distressed look, as well as helping trick the eye into thinking the blend is much more smooth than it actually is. Then continuing in this method, I added light sea gray to the deep sea blue. Feeling fairly happy with the cloak, I moved on to the armor pieces. Although I was trying to paint Hexbane in a single, relatively short session, I still wanted to attempt some NMM. Just get those reps in. Prior to slopping any paint on, I'd moved a light around it, taking some photos as a way of identifying where the highlights and shadows would be. With that in mind, I started painting on dark blue-gray. Then, gradually adding more and more cold white, I built up the highlights and the reflections. Admittedly, I had a pretty tough time here understanding these volumes and where to place the highlights and the shadows. Ultimately going back and forth several times to end up where I did. I'm far from truly happy with the end result here, with some areas coming out considerably better than others. But I do think putting in the work now will help me in the future. The way to get better is to suck first. I hope. As I started moving on to the leather and accessories, I realized just how freaking much stuff was actually on this model. As a way of diminishing or maybe unifying the potential visual clutter, I decided to paint it all the same. So mixing some of the black and mahogany brown that was already on the palette, I started base coating all of the belts, straps, holsters, bag, hat, and whatever else was on there. Then mixing in Sunny Skin Tone, I made fairly large jumps in color, once again using a lot of scratches. Trying to focus on the areas that might see or show a little more wear than others. Finally, using pure Sunny Skin Tone fairly sparingly. To add some more variety and depth to the shadows, I mixed black, brown, and violet inks in fairly even amounts, and glazed that into the darkest recesses and shadows, like the underside of the hat and bottom of the gloves. I then used this same mix to do the same thing to the jacket, trying to add a little more visual interest. With all that leather done, I moved on to the wooden stakes, the torch, and the wood on the guns. Aiming for more of an orange hue here, I started with a mix of flat earth and medium skin tone. Working up to straight medium skin tone, then adding ivory for some further highlights. Finally, I moved on to the fire on the torch. I started by applying white where the flames would be the hottest, the brightest kind of yellow, closest to the source of the flame. And once that was dry, I layered on yellow, orange, and red in quick succession to kind of wet blend the colors together, creating a fairly smooth and natural transition between them. I envisioned fairly greasy black flames, emitting a lot of black smoke as it would be when burning an oil-soaked rag. So I added a fair amount of black to the end of the flames and some of the higher points along it. While I had considered adding some OSL here, I ended up deciding against it, as I was fairly happy with how it was looking and felt like it was a fairly satisfying, reasonably quick result. Essentially, at this point, the risk wasn't worth the reward. So I moved on to the base. I wanted to give the stone tiles of the base a gloomy, dark, bluish, greenish look. So I slopped some elfic flesh all over the base. Something I'd previously noticed with black Templar contrast paint was how green it looked over a bone kind of color, thus the elfic flesh base coat. To finish it off, I did a quick dry brush of light sea gray, slapped some black on the rim, and here we are. Well, there you go, a quick paint job, right around 2.5 hours to get me back into the swing of things. Not really a palette cleanser because my palette was pretty clean from 3 weeks off. More of a momentum builder. Anyways, as always, if you made it this far, you are an absolute legend. Consider supporting the channel by hitting that like button and subscribing. And thanks again for watching. You are awesome, and I'll see you in the next one.